You are now listening to Liberty Coast to Coast, hosted by LibertyViral.com.
No gimmick, if I rip it through, I live it then. And you can't do it, so ain't no need for mimicking. I'm not innocent, I'm on a mission, so let me finish it. Matter of time before they summon the army in. I'm probably on the FBI's most wanted list. I'm probably going to hung like an ornament. I'm on a life mission to abolish all the government.
All right, guys, welcome back to Liberty Coast to Coast with Keith and Kody. Keith is not with us today, but I wanted to cover a story I had written for the Libertarian Republic in regards to a potential pay-for-play that had happened in the state of Florida between Donald Trump and Florida's Attorney General Pam Bondi. The story started off with a tax impropriety that Donald Trump had been caught with, and his campaign had admitted to paying. I believe it was a minimal fee just for improprieties in terms of what they had done with money out of one of Trump's foundations that became a political donation to the Attorney General of Florida. But digging deeper into that story, we found a $25,000 donation that was given to the Attorney General of Florida. Actually, not just given, but asked for by the Attorney General of Florida to Trump, or from Trump. And in this, there was the disappearance of the investigation from the state of Florida into Trump University, which has received almost 20 complaints against it in terms of fraud charges, because the company or the university itself basically was nothing more than a money laundering scheme for Donald Trump. Upon writing the story, I had an email show up in my inbox, and it was from a gentleman named Nick Veser, who is a small businessman from the state of Florida. And he reached out to me regarding the Attorney General of Florida and possible corruption that she's been involved in, not just in the state of Florida, but almost nationwide, and touching places that she shouldn't have any business in. So I'd like to welcome Nick to the show. Nick, how you doing?
I'm doing well, Kody. How are you?
I'm doing very well, thank you. I appreciate you being with us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Of course, of course. I'm going to do a brief recover of your situation, just so that the people listening can get an understanding of what's happened to you. And then you can relate that to why you felt you needed to reach out to me, why you felt this story was important beyond just the issues with Donald Trump and his connection to Pam Bondi, but how it affected you personally as a private citizen, just the powers of big government and big corporatism, in terms of you being able to run your business and you being able to have the life that you want. So I'm going to run through that brief course right now. Basically, the story is that your small company, Veser, right?
Yep.
Small tech company, correct?
Correct.
You guys were sued for $10 million by the state of Florida. Would that be also correct?
Yes, it is.
Okay, and your revenue, what was your, what would you say the most that you guys have ever had in the bank was?
Most money that we've ever had in a bank account throughout our entire existence is $120,000.
So that $10 million seems rather ludicrous.
Mm-hmm.
Well, okay, and then the other thing I have here is that you, if it weren't for a pro bono attorney, somebody who just feels as passionately about this case, that you would pretty much be squashed at the foot of, big government. They'd have their boot on your jugular with no recourse for you.
Yeah, my attorney, Carl Williams, when he got involved with the case, I don't want to make it seem as if he was pro bono from the very beginning. In the beginning, I paid him very well. But as time went on, as time moved on in the case, he realized just how out of control and how much of a miscarriage of justice this entire process has been. So he made a vow to me that no matter what, he was going to see it through to the very end, and he's been following that vow.
That's amazing. That's I couldn't be happier to hear that for you. And in terms of the Attorney General, she's the one that is actually the overseer of this case, correct? She's the one that would have control of whether or not you guys were prosecuted.
Correct. Yeah, Pam Bondi is the Attorney General of Florida. She obviously has people that work for her who have driven the majority of this case, but I feel very strongly that it has been driven from the top in many ways. Just because information that we've uncovered as we've gone along. So without a doubt, and knowing Miss Bundy's improprieties, some of the things that she's done in the past, some of the things that I've read about, it wouldn't surprise me at all if she had a very heavy hand in it.
Right, and just to cover some of that, I know that there's this Dickstein, it's the Dickstein Shapiro law firm that she's had some another appearances of quid pro quo or pay for play issues in terms of them scratching her back and all of a sudden cases that were being investigated by her administration disappearing. So the Donald Trump thing isn't isolated, and unfortunately for you, Nick, it looks like you're just too small to even matter to have your case disappear, right? I mean, your company doesn't seem to be large enough for this just to disappear.
Right, right. Yeah, that seems to be, and that's what's really frustrating, is that people seem to think that if you're a business owner, then automatically you're one of the bad guys. But I'm on the opposite end of that. I'm on the receiving end. I'm the small business owner who pays for the large business donors to these people's political campaigns. That's what it is. That's what they do. Microsoft, Malwarebytes, Matomi USA, these are huge multi-hundred million, some cases billion dollar corporations that are supporting these candidates by putting money into their campaign, and whatever they want to see happen is what happens, and that's when the little man gets stomped out.
Right, and then that definitely seems to be the case here. I mean, it's gone so far with your case, and we can get a little bit further into this, that it kind of started with a disgruntled employee, is what it sounds like. And this disgruntled employee went to Malwarebytes, who is a company that is larger than yours, in the same, I believe it's the same space of work that you guys do, correct?
Well, they're an antivirus company, anti-malware company, and yeah, there were some. They had written a blog, and there were some things in that blog that we just absolutely knew not to be true. Like, they had claimed that we had stolen $250,000 worth of keys. They had put blogs that had phone numbers that weren't associated. We just knew that there were aspects of it that were absolutely wrong. And we also knew the person who would have given him that false information, because those are the threats that they've made. So we were able to pretty quickly identify the individual and how it came to be. And then on top of it, in the blog itself, they said that they had sent us a cease and desist letter, which we had never received. So there were too many red flags in the blog for us to not know that there was something else in play.
Yeah, and you know that based on everything that you've told me, based on everything I've read of the case, it sounds very much that way. It sounds like that one disgruntled employee went to somebody bigger and larger who they knew, could cause you some big problems, and it seems to have snowballed into a giant governmental, slapdown of somebody who had no business or had no reason to be investigated. I've been reading about this email that you were sending out to try to gain attention for your story, and where you talked about the fact that you guys only had one complaint of the time that this was filed, right? This court case was filed, where Donald
Correct.
Trump.
Well, two complaints
Okay.
when the actual lawsuit was filed. One when the initial subpoena for investigation was issued. So.
And you would say you probably have about 25,000 customers at that time?
Correct. Yep.
Okay. And just to put that in perspective for people listening, Donald Trump had over 22 or around 22 different complaints against him and Trump University. He's a presidential candidate who has funding and access, and you had two complaints.
Right.
And your case is
both people that had been refunded, the people who were complaining about Trump University had spent upwards of $30,000, $35,000 on that, and they had absolutely no recourse. They hadn't gotten their money back. Those were real people who really had been harmed.
Yeah, I had actually even heard on some cases there that one guy had to file bankruptcy because he had gone so far into the hole to try to get his money back from what happened with Trump University. And it seems like for some reason, the whole scandal, even though there's pretty much nobody you could ask at this point about Trump University who would say that it wasn't a scam, it never has somehow fallen through the prosecution of the fraud that they've been committing. Yet here you are sitting in, this small company, small business world. And for some reason, the Attorney General has found you more worthy of investigation than Trump University over two complaints, one of which seems to be from, or both of which, sorry, seem to be from people who you guys actually took care of and happened post filing of the lawsuit, correct?
Correct. Oh yeah, the complaints were all resolved, and that's what's so. It's not bizarre because when you really get to the bottom of it and you understand why it all happened, it's not bizarre at all. But the individual who wrote that blog against us happened to be an expert in an FTC case that coincided with this. Press releases went out on it, and they set a course. It was an impossible case to not pursue after they put all of this information, all of this negative, erroneous information out there. They had to follow through with it. They had to follow through with our case. And, you know, in the case of Trump, he can donate $25,000 to a campaign and then it goes away. And then, you know, of course, Attorney General Bondi will plead ignorance. She wasn't aware of the money or where it was coming from or what it was. But I, who never received any notice from anyone that we had done anything wrong, which still to this day we haven't done anything wrong, but even their opinion that we had done something wrong was never conveyed to me. So how is it that they can come after me, sue me for $10 million, destroy my life essentially off of 2 complaints? That's what it comes down to, 2 complaints.
Right. And did you try to cause problems for them when they were investigating you? Were you somehow antagonistic of the government when they came after you, enough to piss them off to go after you as they have?
Not at all. I was entirely forthcoming. As soon as they came, we complied with every subpoena. We went through every deposition. In January 2015, they deposed me, and I came home and I told my wife, I cleared everything up. Everything's fine. There shouldn't be an issue. I guarantee you there's not. I read people really well. I knew there wasn't going to be an issue, yet they filed anyway.
Yeah, that's what I'm reading. And you know, I believe there was something we spoke about before that they were supposed to file upon, or that they are supposed to use as documentation for giving them reason to file against you. Do you want to go into that as well?
Yeah, well, the statute reads that there is the head of the enforcing authority is required to sign off on what's called a determination of public interest after reviewing the case. 3 other tech companies were sued that same day. And this is one of those examples where they just cast a big net and then they try to make their case afterwards. So all 3 of those other cases were filed with the proper documentation, the determination of public interest. They had a motion for injunctive relief and asset freeze attached to all 3 of them. Our case was basically a shell of a document. It was a form complaint that they just copied and pasted from the other complaints, enter our name, put our revenues in, that kind of thing, and no determination of public interest, no injunctive relief, none of that, because they still had to get their evidence. If we didn't fight, it wouldn't be a big deal. If we didn't fight, they would have just settled with us. We would have given them money. Nobody would have ever known that they filed the case
right
incorrectly. But
right.
because we decided to fight, now we have to go get some evidence. Now we need to go create some evidence. And
yeah, they have to cover their tracks.
Yeah, and everything after that is tainted as far as I'm concerned. You cannot be the trusted party anymore if the only reason that you're going out and getting this evidence is because I've decided to fight you.
Yeah, that would be like, you know, you walking down the street and you go into the grocery store. The grocery store was robbed, and they just assume that they're going to grab the first person walking out of the grocery store, that they have no evidence. They arrest you, find out who you are, and then paste the evidence to the place that you were.
Of course. And they have the ability to do that. They're the government. They can do whatever they want. They get it, and they have people helping them everywhere, including Malwarebytes.
Right. Well, yeah, and that sounds like that corporatism we were talking about earlier, especially in terms of Bundy. When it comes to people she needs to scratch her back, she also has found that if she can scratch somebody else's, that may be beneficial for her long term. But getting back to the case, the evidence seems to be I mean, in terms of them filing against you, whether, post file or not, even if they filed this evidence prior to, this seems sort of ridiculous. They're filing it based off of one complaint. And I believe we talked about they had one undercover phone call, or that they claimed they only had one undercover phone call, which you guys handled properly. And the Malwarebytes blog, which has never been verified. They didn't care to testify, and nor did they know who the author was. Is that all correct?
Right. They claim they didn't know, but that's what's kind of key about the cease and desist letter that Malwarebytes claimed to put in their letter to me. If you notice it during the August log that Malwarebytes wrote, at the very end of it, it says they've been sent a cease and desist letter. It also has a different company name in there because it's a form letter, but that's another story. I never received that cease and desist letter. Still to this day, I've never received it. Well, during my deposition in January of 2015, I was presented with that cease and desist letter by the Attorney General asking me if I had seen this before. So 4 months later, we deposed their investigator, and they claimed they didn't know Jerome Segura. So if they didn't know Jerome Segura, how is it that they came to have that cease and desist letter that they put in front of me during my deposition? It's impossible. It's impossible. Right. Of course they knew Jerome Segura. Of course they were working with him all along. He was an expert in the FTC case that they had worked on the day before, the one that was tied to me in the press release. They knew everything about it. It was corporatism. It was a collaborative effort between the two to make sure that I didn't find that out. But it's clear.
And we see things like this all the time. I mean, I know something that's been pertinent in the news that kind of leads to not necessarily exactly this case, but we see the small man get kind of squashed out, and the effect on the market and small businesses in terms of like the EpiPen case, where the FDA not approving its competitors makes the EpiPen have a monopoly in the system, and that builds this corporatism that scratches government's back. And then you get people like you who run a small business. You guys are doing everything you can to be ethical and to be clean, especially in the IT business, where we've spoken and you've told me that it's nearly impossible to do. Because it's the scare tactics in that field are so easy. People don't understand IT well enough to be able to protect themselves from scam artists. But when you're running an ethical company and you piss one person off, and that person happens to work or be somewhere where they have some sort of power and can drag you into cases like this, it could really ruin, not just your business, but your life, the way of living that you've had.
Well, the way that go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, when really all this would have needed was, hey, sorry, you didn't belong in this. We'll let you go.
Yep, absolutely. And I think that if it hadn't gone so far before we showed our first signs of fighting, they may have done that. I guarantee you, if they were to be asked honestly today, would you rather have gone this route or backed away? An honest person in that department would absolutely say I would have rather backed away, because they found out later, okay, we were kind of barking up the wrong tree. This guy clearly was doing it a little bit differently. Plus, we didn't go after who they claimed was the main problem, and that was Matomi USA, the company that was sending us all the referrals. That was the main allegation, was the marketing, when we had nothing to do with it.
Right, you had paid for, to be clear, the Matomi USA is a marketing company for you that you pay to run your ads. So had your ads been
we didn't pay them to run ads. We bought referrals from them. So
gotcha.
They were in control of ads. Yeah,
gotcha. So they were bringing people to you. Yeah, they were bringing people to you through their ads.
Sending us referrals. Yep, along with 10 other companies.
So basically, any advertising that would have been malicious would have been on their end, not yours, and the complaint should have been filed through Matomi.
Right, if there was any. They still haven't proven to this day that any of it was deceptive or unfair in the first place.
Right, and that's what you said. Even through their expert who was deposed, he said that he found no evidence of wrongdoing.
Right. Well, of course, he changed his story when it came to the trial, to the hearing, because they have to do that. That's what they have to do. But
yeah, he's stuck in the same. he's kind of stuck underneath the thumb of the people he works for as well. But As I was going through this, there seemed to be some oddities that happened to you as well, beyond just, judicial. Like, I mean, we're talking extrajudicial stuff that, if was provable, if you had evidence showing that you could prove who did these things, I mean, that would bring a whole new light to the story. We're talking emails being, or not emails, texts being just vanished, right? From your phones after somebody walking in a room, right?
Yeah, so we were in a hearing, and my attorney, Carl Williams, who, by the way, sits on the ethics committee, evaluates complaints that come into the bar. His father was a judge. I mean, he knows his stuff. So he was sitting there, and somebody walked into the back of the courtroom that my wife described as techie looking, left 10 minutes later. That day at lunch, he went to get a text from me, and all of them were gone. The text messages were gone, and it was during the hearing. My CIO's car was broken into 3 days before the hearing under lights. I mean, his car's never been broken into before, never been broken into after, and all of the corporate documents taken out of the car. There's countless. We had thousands of hack attempts a day. We would put a trap on our network just to see how many people were hacking the system or attempting to hack the system a day, and it was thousands. It was constant attempts, and things always picked up whenever things were intense in the case. We would get a bunch of calls with people trying to get us to sell them something that they didn't need. We would get just crazy stuff, and it was always at those times. So you know what I did? I called the FBI. I called the FBI about the hack attempts, and they said, well, we would need to make your office would need to become a crime scene, and you would have to shut down business until the investigation was over.
Oh, that's convenient. That's just something everybody can do, right? Just put your livelihood on hold, especially while you're fighting off the case of your life, just to figure out why the government's trying to hack into your own emails, right? Yeah. Ironic there. But no, and then they brought in a tech also, or not a tech, excuse me, but a representative from Microsoft to argue semantics over the description of your company. Is that also correct?
Right. So, Pam Bondi, she has a lot of corporate, contacts, and she uses them. And that's the thing, unfortunately. I've read about her, and I've learned more about her as time has gone on. And they had trouble with this case. They had trouble getting enough evidence, enough people to really make their point. So they called in a favor to Microsoft, and a Microsoft representative didn't come into the courtroom to testify. They were allowed to testify by phone. And when they testified by phone, they stated that what we had done that was in violation of our partner agreement with them was, instead of saying that we were in the Microsoft partner network, we said we were a Microsoft partner. So the difference between being in a partner network or a Microsoft partner. And I even responded to Microsoft. I said, I wonder what the partners that pay you, because I figured out the money on it, and they receive, I think, $380 million a year in partner revenue. Just because people want to say they're a partner of Microsoft. They pay $500 each for a particular partnership.
Right.
Each one of these companies pays $500 to Microsoft just to say that they're a partner. So there's $380 million coming into Microsoft in partner revenue every year. I wonder what all those other companies would say if they found out that if you don't say you're in the Microsoft partner network, but you say you're a Microsoft partner, we're going to come to court and we're going to testify against you over the phone, when the state of Florida, the largest possible nemesis you can have is against you. We're going to come testify against you over the phone.
Now that also leads to some constitutional questions as well, because I believe documented in the Constitution is the right to face your accuser, the right to face those testifying against you. So I wondered how that would hold up, not having the expert in there in order to testify to something. I know that there's been recent law being created elsewhere in terms of young kids who may have been, in violent sex crimes, being allowed to use video or audio testimony simply because of the emotion involved in the case. But this isn't anything like that. This is literally they allowed somebody to phone themselves in, not have to look you in the eye in order to make the petty accusation as it was.
Right. So those all apply to criminal cases, because I've asked a lot of the same questions. Unlawful search and seizure, look your accuser in the eye, all of these different, things that are written into the Constitution. And my concern was similar. I mean, there was a lot of stuff that they did wrong, but according to my attorney, there's a different standard for which they need to follow when it comes to criminal versus civil. This is a civil matter, and there's a lesser burden of proof. And the way the law is written, and you're absolutely right, the law is the problem. The way the law is written is they call them the trusted party, the enforcing authority, and if they say, people who think that this can't happen to them, if they say that you have done something unfair and deceptive and they're unwilling to bend from that argument, you better be willing to say, yes, that's the truth, or your life will be destroyed. I don't want to give the impression that my life has been destroyed so much that, I mean, I've got an unbelievable 6-year-old boy. My wife, I love more than anything in this world. They're extremely supportive. We have a life. But imagine being in a situation where your son gets sent $50 from his grandfather for his birthday, and instead of depositing that check into a checking account so that he can save for college, you have to cash that check so that he can use it to buy a toy or something, because that same account is under the same scrutiny and can be seized by the government at any point during this entire process. It's insane. It's my entire life. It's been for the last 3 years where I can't do anything. I can't get a job. I can't create, because everybody wants to know why the state of Florida has a problem with Nick Veser.
There's definitely a film or a lens over you that says, hey, under investigation, right? That makes it hard. It's kind of like the comparison to people who are accused of wrongdoing, go through the process, all of a sudden are dismissed, but forever now they have to live with this film of why did they go after you in the first place? And
whereas other people, if they settle,
there's nothing.
Whatever, it's over. So you settled because you probably did something wrong. I fight because I didn't do anything wrong, and there's a lens over me. Period.
Right.
It's crazy.
And not only did you not do anything wrong, in their attempts to prosecute you, they're using hearsay evidence. It's all circumstantial, and not only that, it's completely unverified. They haven't gone through any steps to double check, one, the blog, which is an opinion piece at best, an opinion piece based on somebody who was a disgruntled employee who, if you put on the stage because of their emotion to the case, wouldn't have been allowed to testify because they could not be seen as a rational testimony, right? You can't take somebody who holds so much emotion something that they're willing to bias what they're going to say as opposed to give the truth. And that is basically the headpiece for what has gone after you. And in any other case, in any private case if it was a case between you and I was suing you for this situation, they wouldn't let me use a blog to defend my case against you. There's no way in hell that would ever pay out.
No, absolutely. And my attorney will tell you that if this were anybody else, if it were me against another company or an organization, this case would have been thrown out a year ago, because there is not only so much done wrong, but there's such a lack of real evidence to support their case, because their primary statements about us are absolutely they're just incorrect. They're factually incorrect. They don't know what they're talking about. They still to this, or they do know what they're talking about, and they just know that they can't get out of it. And that's
Right.
probably the more likely scenario, because I don't think they're that stupid. They can't be that stupid to not realize that they got the wrong guy.
It would almost be
They,
scarier if they were that stupid.
yeah, no, the corruption is the answer. Think about, I mean, again, you do a cursory overview of Pam Bondi and you look at her history. There's the New York Times article that you referenced. There's further information. James Slattery of Millennium Pharmaceuticals, which I'm sure you want to talk about a little bit. There is her ties to huge corporate donors across the board, and it only seems to be getting more. And something else I noticed the hurricane that just hit Florida. She puts out, she tries to make herself look like she's really on the hunt for justice, and she sets up this 1-800 line for price gougers. She sets it up beforehand. So it's a proactive measure that she's taking. So she hasn't seen any price gouging, but she's setting up a proactive number because she wants, hey, look, I'm on your side. I'm doing the right thing.
Right.
I'm out there for you. But it's not like that. She's doing that because she wants to cover up all the other stuff that's plaguing her.
It's that smoke screen and mirrors defense almost. And the scarier part about this is I've heard from several people that if Donald Trump is elected, she may be on his council. She may be somebody that he pulls in to help him run the United States of America. And if that doesn't show you how connected those two are, and if that doesn't show you that at the very least with that one case in Trump University and her dismissal of it, that she should have recused herself from the position entirely. In terms of being able to make a judgment on it, that's a whole other scandal in and of itself. And then we have her going after you. We have her connections to James Slattery, as you had explained, who was using essentially narcotics to test on elderly, right? Do I have that correct?
She was testing elderly patients, or Millennium Labs was testing elderly patients for drugs like PCP, crazy drugs that they wouldn't be taking to scam Medicare. They were scamming Medicare, and they scammed them out of billions, I think. I think they settled for $256 million. But Pam Bondi wrote a letter in favor of Millennium Laboratories and James Slattery, saying that this drug testing was necessary. It was a requirement for, and really standing out there and getting ahead of this. And she did it 2 years after her investigation had opened up into the case. So she either was totally unaware, which again, she claims ignorance, or there was some knowledge and she didn't care because her pockets were getting lined through donations. But there's
right.
Listen, just because somebody doesn't send an email, just because Pam Bondi didn't send an email to Donald Trump saying, hey, if you pay me $25,000, I'll drop your investigation, doesn't mean that's not what happened. In fact,
right.
When the evidence points to something, it's most likely the case. I hate to say that it's circumstantial or that it's hearsay, because it is, and we're talking about the same thing over here, but I'm still getting screwed over it. They're not paying any price for it. They can claim ignorance all day long. They can say whatever they want. Nobody's even going after them for it.
Right, because in order to bring a case against the government, you would have to have evidence. And the problem is, if you were held to the same standard, you could bring the same exact case against what they're doing, but they're going to hold you to a different standard in terms of what you have to present against the government than what the government has to present against you. Because I have this feeling that if you were Microsoft and this all of a sudden happened, and you maybe threw some money toward her campaign or her finances, that this probably would have disappeared for you. It seems evident throughout her history that is what's happened with her. And unfortunately,
as a matter of fact, there's a telecom in northern Florida, Frontier Communications took over all Verizon's customers. You want to look this up too. They had gotten hundreds of complaints from consumers. So Attorney General Bundy stepped in and made sure that this wasn't going to happen anymore. And Frontier had to come up and make a public apology and okay, everything's okay. Because Frontier is a huge corporation. They had hundreds of complaints. from Frontier customers, Attorney General Bundy stepped in, made sure that they weren't going to do it anymore. Game over. They stay in business. My only source of income for my entire family, my only source of income is one business that I'm doing honest and ethically. And as a matter of fact, March of 2015, when they filed the lawsuit, I fired that marketing company. I fired that Matomi USA, and lived our entire company from that point on was off either repeat business or business customers. So even more so since March of 2015, there is nothing they can point to that even vaguely would fit their mold of what wrong would be.
Right.
But they begrudge me that. They don't even want me to make a living, because if I make a living, then I'm making enough money that I can fight them. But they're not aware of my arrangement with my attorney. They don't realize that he is sickened by them and is willing to go all the way.
Do you think that after this interview, he would be willing to talk with me?
Yeah, I think so. Absolutely. I know he's got his kids this weekend, but as soon as he's available.
Yeah, I mean, we can always do it as an update to this piece as well. I can add it in at a different time. But, you know, it's just amazing to me, because I was looking at some of the other things that was going through this list. And the judge, I believe her name was Catherine M. Brunson. Do I have that correct?
Catherine Brunson,
that was
yes.
The injunction. She was on the case for the injunctive relief and asset freeze.
Yep. Yes.
Okay. And she told you, based on her zero knowledge of the industry, that of the 10 million, you guys had to freeze $500,000 in a interest building account in terms of in protection of the fact that you could be found guilty.
Correct. Exactly. So in the event that they prevail, then that $500,000 is in an escrow, an interest-bearing escrow account for repayment in that event. Right now, my bank accounts combined, personal and business, have less than $5,000 now. Maybe less than $8,000 in them, and my I don't own a house. There's zero assets that I could possibly sell. Oh, and everything's shut down on me. So any money that I do have left has to pay my bills for my family.
Of course.
So I'm left in a very, very difficult position. Yeah, just because they made this decision based on no bank statements, no anything. It was just a blanket, hey, pay $500,000 into it in case you lose. In a trial.
Which is also interesting, because then they're almost kind of presuming guilt. Like I'm sure this has happened in case law before where people just do it, but it's frustrating to see that in a society where you're taught you're innocent until proven guilty, that they're holding you to the standard that you're going to be looked at as guilty, and we're going to protect the fact that you could be guilty up until you prove yourself innocent.
Yeah, pretty much.
That's an insane standard.
And it's because of the way that injunction and asset freeze, as it pertains to deceptive and unfair trade practice act within the Florida code, and any code in the United States mostly, is written. The way that it's written allows for the what do they say? Relief is favored in the relief favors those who were affected rather than the people who gained from it. Mm-hmm. But again, there was nobody asking for relief. There was nobody. I mean, I have so much more evidence to support how good of a service people were receiving. I mean, I still get it to this day. People love us. People love us. We had a nun testify at our hearing. I mean, but when you're up against the government, and this is what people need to understand, when I set out to do this, when I made a conscious decision that I was not going to let this happen to me and my family, it wasn't just, I'm not trying to sound altruistic here, but it wasn't just because I was some sort of self-preservation. It wasn't all about self-preservation. There was a huge part of it that saw that this could easily happen tomorrow to you or anybody else. It could easily happen. It's the wrong set of circumstances leading up to a culmination, in a terrible event. And then if you have the type of constitution that I do, you're not going to take it. You're not going to take it. I said very clearly, if nothing else, they will never forget me. They will never forget me.
Right.
Because,
And we've talked about it before too, but that if everybody rolls over and plays with them, then, you know, we're going to set the precedent that people can't fight the government in general, and they get stronger each time somebody rolls over. Each time somebody who's done nothing wrong plays ball with them, it hurts the people who haven't done wrong and choose to fight, because it makes your cases more difficult. It sets not just a personal, I guess, precedent, but it sets almost a judicial precedent that they don't have to file paperwork properly. They don't have to, because they don't have to do this ever, right? That this is almost something they don't practice because it happens so little that they actually have to defend themselves.
well, when we were deposing their investigator, we said, how many times have you testified at a hearing? Once. Hearing, once. How many times have you testified at trial? 0. You know how many years he worked for them? 9. 9
Wow.
years at the Attorney General's office, and he's testified at 1 hearing, now 2, and 0 trials, because
That's amazing.
they know that they're going to burn you out. They know that they're going to burn you out, and then you can. Because I said to my wife, I said, how will I teach my son to walk like a man in the world if I don't do this? She, of course, said that I'm not going to be able to walk like a man at the end of it, but
well, you know, who knows? Maybe it happens all the time, and it's always the one person who's determined enough to see it through. And it sounds like you're one of those guys. It may not be easy. It may not be the path of least resistance, but it's something. If you don't stand for something, you'll fall for anything, I think is the quote. And this is one of those cases. If you don't stand on your principles, if you don't stand for what you believe in, you let yourself roll over, you let those around you roll over, and you tell other people that it's better just to roll over and die. And unfortunately, with a society, even if just looking at this presidential election, this is what it's caused. We have somebody who is a narcissist, egomaniac businessman on one hand, and we have somebody who's potentially not qualified to work at any police department because of her criminal record, just on the surface, and at worst could be tied to one of the largest money laundering campaigns through the Clinton Foundation that's ever existed. But again, they get away with it because they have access. And you know, we get to these points because people just continue to, one, in the presidential elections, pick the lesser of two evils with no recourse, or two, in cases like yours, people just decide that it's not worth the battle to fight. And I can tell you from my side of things, the reason I got into activism is for the same reason. I don't get paid for this. I'm not here to make money. I don't have an agenda. All I want to do is bring light to the things and to the problems of government affecting people's lives. And that's not to say that everybody who works for government is corrupt, but government as an entity creates a monster that is almost impossible to fight off when it gets to a certain point. And if we continue to allow things to happen without recourse, without people like you standing up and fighting it, we're going to be in a worse situation a year from now, 2 years from now, God forbid, 20 years from now, if nobody stands up and makes a difference. Yeah,
and I know that deep in my soul, and that's why this is so important to me. That's why this entire, it's not about me. I want for things to work out, and I wanted to, but if they think twice before they do this again, then I've done my job in some way. There's been some small change. I mean, if you think about, you know, this presidential election, you know, they talk about Gary Johnson getting in at 15%. If he does get in at 15%, they will keep the camera off of him the way they did Martin O'Malley. Was that his name?
Mm-hmm.
Martin O'Malley. The way they kept it off of Martin O'Malley. I mean, they will just continue to have us focused on these two awful picks. I mean, it's insane. It's insane that they can actually continue to lead us down this two-party, even when they're the worst candidates in the world, playground. It's crazy.
Yeah, and I completely agree. And it does trickle down. It does affect people's lives, and your firsthand experience of that. And I appreciate you sharing your story. And if there's anything else you want to add that you feel like we haven't covered yet, let's talk about that now, because I want to get your entire story out there. But if not, definitely have your lawyer get in contact with me. I'd love to have a chat like I have with you in regards to the legal aspects of this and the way he sees it versus the way we see it, because he has a whole different perspective on it. But yeah, is there anything else you felt like you want to add that we may have not have covered, or is there anything else that we can do to help you get the story out?
No, I just want people to know. I want people to know about not only what's going on in Florida, but it's what's going on all over the United States. You see all the time investigations into attorney generals. Attorney generals are getting much more political. They're getting much more partisan, and they're getting much more powerful.
They're also just running into presidential candidates' husbands on tarmacs.
Yeah, exactly. So, but that's the problem. You've got this very powerful group of people who are the top cop. When you're the top cop, you shouldn't be political. That's the bottom line. I mean, sheriffs, you don't know what their political leanings are. You shouldn't. It's not important.
Justice is blind.
Justice is blind, but it's not. I can tell you firsthand, it's absolutely not. So
no, I appreciate you sharing your story with us. I'm going to do what I can in my power to help push this forward. Like I said, I plan on writing this article for you and putting it out not only on the Libertarian Republic, getting this media out as far as we can. But I also plan on forwarding this to multiple publications out in Florida, because I think if we can make this a more local issue for you, that'll bring more light to your situation in your area. Even though now I know that you have moved to Pennsylvania, this affects where your company's located. I think that the more light we shine to the darkness, the harder it is for them to hide. And if that's a small step or a small victory, like you said, if that's just them thinking twice, that's a victory, because the next time they do it, maybe they hesitate again. And then they say, maybe we shouldn't proactively investigate something we have no evidence for. It's small fights like this that are the most cause-worthy, in my opinion. And I really do deeply appreciate you sharing your story with me, Nick. Yeah,
absolutely, Kody. And I appreciate you telling it. And anytime you want to have me back on, I'll be happy to. I do a lot of research on this stuff. I'm waiting for the day that the smoking gun against her comes out, so that people start questioning all of her decisions and what she's done.
Yeah, and then again, that has nothing to even do with political party, but more about the fact of it's all corrupt. It doesn't matter which party they're part of, it's all corrupt, and we need to start looking at them that way, through that lens, government versus the citizen, that they are representatives of us, not the other way around, and that the error, if any, should be followed into the citizen until it's proven otherwise. So with that, I think we will leave this here. I will get to work for you and see what I can do to help you out. And if anything else pops up, if there are any new changes and anything going on, please don't hesitate to let me know. And we'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, Kody. I appreciate it.
All right. Thank you, Nick. And thank you, everybody, for listening. And we will see you guys next time.